Hello, everyone. My name is Jill Rowetter, and I'm a District RN for Jeffco Public Schools. I'm also a member of the District COVID Resource Team. And a couple members of the team and I came together. We took your feedback and collected your ideas and came up with a way to streamline the illness surveillance process for the upcoming semester. In this video, I'm going to show you how to utilize that step by step. Share my screen here. Along with this video, you should be getting a copy of this spreadsheet here, as well as a document called Illness Surveillance Process that walks you through step by step all of the different scenarios in which we would utilize this spreadsheet. So each health room is going to want to copy and paste this tab into their current health room log and start utilizing it starting Tuesday. So the first scenario we're going to go over is when a student is called in sick to the attendance line. So once a day, the attendance secretary is going to come into the spreadsheet and enter the information for any of the students that were called in sick. Now, the intention, of course, is that the attendance secretary would be doing this part. We certainly want to encourage that, but we do know that different schools have different systems, so this may be a health aide or another person doing this part. So as you can see here, Brad Pitt and Bend It Like Beckham are entered here. You would check the attendance line box here, whether the student was remote or not, who is reporting them, and what the illness or symptoms reported are here. Now these columns are colored yellow for a reason, because those are the only columns that need to be filled in by the attendance secretary during this process. And it only needs to be day one of the absences for these students. So once a day, they'll come in, they'll enter the kiddos that were called in sick and initial over here in column S, and they are done. Then after that process, once a day, the health aides are going to want to come through and just do a little bit of follow-up here. So they're going to go into this column here, a day 3 of symptoms, and set the day 3. So if these students were called in on 1/6, then their day 3 would fall on 1/8, and we go ahead and put that here. And then we're going to check off that the letter was sent. So the health aides will need to contact these families and provide for them the COVID symptom parent letter. And that's the same letter that we were sending out last semester. We have updated that, and there is a link to that in the illness surveillance process page here, but they're just check off that the letter has been sent to those families, whether it was a phone call or email, and then we know that those families know about the protocol and the possible upcoming phone call on day 3 if necessary. So the next scenario that we would come up with is children that are in person and end up in the medical safe room due to illness during the school day. So this looks very similar to the way it was before the COVID room tab. So these students are lines 4, 5, and 6. So you have throughout this, on the 6th, these children came through. So James Dean was in the medical safe room, had a cough. We took his temperature, time parent was contacted, and that student ended up going home. Dad picked him up. So this looks exactly the same as it did before. And then you have Star-Lord, felt hot, had a fever. That kid went home as well. Same information here. And then down here, we have Jody Dickerson came into the room with a runny nose. And if we come over here, we see that the health aide looked up that kiddo in campus, and that kiddo was flagged for seasonal allergies, and that those were typical symptoms for that student. So per the RN, that student was sent back to class. And all that information is in here. And you will see here that my health aide initialed that, and as well as checked off the letters sent boxes. And that is because those letters were handed to the parents when those students were picked up. And then we come back over here. And the next scenario that we would cover is students that have been quarantined for one reason or another. So here on line 7, we have Bob Marley was called in by Ziggy, and that student is on quarantine due to a positive exposure. And so if we can utilize this for our quarantine tab as well. So we come over here and we have a quarantine column here. And this states that dad was positive, and the end date for that quarantine is 1/14. So we don't need a lot of extra information in here. So this is perfect. We just need the reason and the end date. Of course, it's possible that the nurse or health aide are going to contact that family and follow up and make sure that that date is appropriate and everything is good. But other than that, for the purposes of this spreadsheet, this looks good here. Then the next reason we might, we have Steve Carell here, down here, and we look over in the quarantine tab, column, and it says exposure to neighbor on 115. And then under the notes, we see that teacher forwarded the email. So this is a scenario that we see often as well, where the family may contact someone else besides the attendance secretary or the nurse to let them know. Sometimes even the student themselves will let teachers know over Zoom or what have you what's going on. So sometimes we just make some notes where we might have gotten that information, and we add that to our quarantine tab. So another scenario that we would have is if we had a positive student. So when the school finds out about a positive student, we're definitely going to want to enter that student in here. We just put under notes positive. And then over here, there's an isolation column. And so we will just enter the end date of that isolation in that column and then make some notes here. So it looks like family exposure, positive student form completed, see contact log. Again, we don't need a lot of additional information. It's for sure in that situation, the nurse will have contacted the family, filled out the student positive form, and done a lot more follow up than that. But for this purpose, we can just leave it pretty simple. And then we're going to want to turn those positive ones red. So we go up to the little bucket, and that way we can find our positives on the form very easily. So the next thing that you would want to do for any of these quarantined or positive students would be to contact the teachers of those students by email and let them know that that student is going to need some makeup work. We want to be really careful when we send those emails that we're not revealing any extra information or reasons why. With quarantine or positive, doesn't matter. It's none of it's a HIPAA violation to kind of reveal anything more than that. So we say in those emails that we're just letting them know the name of the student, the release date of when that student can come back to school, and that they may need some to provide some makeup work there. Also, it's always good from the family side when we talk to the families to encourage them to reach out to the teacher for that as well. So down here, I've just put in 3 more names for an example of, Olive Oil, who was a positive student here, may have caused a quarantine at school due to being at school during her communicable period. And Olive Oil took out Howie Mandel, Bobby Flay, and Abe Lincoln here. And so we just added those students because they were on quarantine again to the quarantine column. And we have 2nd grade quarantine and when they are released. And that is the only thing that we really need to keep track of there, as long as those kiddos are staying non-symptomatic, of course. And so the only other thing that we want to do here in this process is go back and follow up on day 3s. Now, of course, if the health aides can help us out with that, that's great. So the next thing that we want them to do is once a day, we want to go in and check on the day 3. So let's say today is January 8th. And we're going to go in and see that there are 4 students that are on day 3 of symptoms. And so what we're going to want to do is either look up those kids in campus under the attendance tab, or we can run an attendance report to see if any of those students have been gone for 3 days. So we have this date return to school column. And so if those students came back to school, looks like Bend It Like Beckham came back 2 days later, and James Dean came back the very next day, and that's great. So we put that symptoms are resolved, they're back at school. Sounds like they're good as long as they haven't shown up in your medical safe room. Things are good. And so the only 2 students that we have left are going to be Brad Pitt and Star-Lord. So now the only responsibility for the RN at that time, as far as illness surveillance, is to go in and call these 2 families that are on day 3. There's also been included an RN review column, just like the typical health room log or the diabetes log tabs. We definitely want the RN to go through often and check off and make sure everything, all the information is good in here. And that is the whole process here of utilizing this spreadsheet. We're hoping that it all kind of comes together and it makes it a little bit easier for everyone involved. And we appreciate that the health aides are going to help us out a little bit more this semester with this process. We are certainly open to feedback. And so if anybody needs to contact, has some ideas or something that's missing or might work, we can contact the DL quarantine or the DL COVID team and go ahead and let us know, and we will take it to the team and see if it works. So I just want to thank everyone for listening to this training and let us know if you need anything. Thanks so much.